everyone. Today we're going to discuss about the advance in Nikola Tesla technologies. We have our very expert panelist, Professor David B. Smith. So, Professor David Smith, what you want to share about the new innovation on Nikola Tesla? We know many startups they are trying to develop this Nikola Tesla different technology, especially in the energy sectors. So, what you want to add for today's discussion? Specifically, Nikola Tesla is a big inspiration for the around the world. So, how it can motivate the new generations to go for new research and innovations to find out the new way for helping the global communities. So, David Smith, this is your time.
Dr. Sharif, thank you so much. I mean, Nikola Tesla was an inventor, as we've talked about in the prior programs, which was well before his time in these areas. And he's made dozens and dozens of breakthroughs in the production, transmission, and applications of electric power and other types of power that he did. He invented the first alternating current motor. He developed AC generation transmission technology, and uh, and he really spent a lot of time doing it. Uh, and it was very interesting when you began to look back at them. I think it's important as we set the stage to remember that he was born way back in 1856, and then his father was a priest and his mother managed the farm. And that it was his mother who encouraged him really to study math and physics and become an inventor and beginning to move forward. And it was very interesting also in that he was one who invented most of his ideas in his mind first before he put anything on paper. It's like back in 1882 on a walk, he came up with the idea for the alternating current motor and began to move forward and beginning to do that with others. And, he had a lot of interesting work where he worked for Thomas Edison for a while. And when he worked for Thomas Edison, who was trying to power the United States, it was mostly DC power. And Thomas Edison wanted to do DC power, where Tesla thought alternating current was the best one. And then he partnered with Westinghouse later to do that. Tesla had actually tried to start his own Tesla Electric Light Company and did not find many backers to get it in there. But on the other hand, he was granted more than 30 patents for his inventions during that time. And that's what caught George Westinghouse's attention on it and began to move to power. But part of what he wanted to do with this is that he wanted to begin to look at ways to improve society. And he invented electric oscillators, meters, lights, high voltage transformers. Many of those are known as the Tesla coil, which is great. He experimented with X-rays. He developed two-way remote control boats. He demonstrated radio communications a couple of years before Marconi did. Marconi ended up commercializing it. Nikola Tesla applied for a patent. Marconi had overturned. Just recently, that was overturned and given back to the Tesla Foundation. So a lot of very interesting things going through it. But Sharif, your question was explicitly about some of the power and some of the systems he did. What he wanted to do is he believed that the transmission of power should be not be done over wires, but that it could be done wirelessly. And his Tesla coil was part of what he wanted to do with that. And so he began looking at experiments with that and how to apply them. And he had a lot of success leading up to that. In 1895, Tesla designed what was among the first AC hydroelectric power plants in the United States in Niagara Falls, New York. And he used that to actually helped power part of the city of Buffalo, New York, and furthered how the alternating electric current became the standard we actually have well around the world now. But going back to the Tesla coil, he saw that as the foundation for wireless technologies. And it's used not only to transmit power, but it's used in a lot of the foundation for wireless technology and is still used in radio technology today. And that is it. And he used it to try to begin to do this wireless transmission of power that you're talking about. Around the turn of the century, Tesla became obsessed with the wireless transmission of energy. And he wanted to build a wireless global communication system to be transmitted through a few very large electric towers for sharing information, but also providing free, and he wanted to do it for free, energy throughout the world. And he had a group of investors at the time that helped him begin to move into that project, including JP Morgan. And he worked and he designed a lab with a power plant, massive transmission tower on a site up in Long Island, New York. And that's where he began to work this experiments. Uh, you know, they began to really moving it. However, later he had to file for bankruptcy, and the tower was dismantled before he was able to results of this technology. And but today, about what, 73, 75 years after his death, we're seeing his ideas for this wireless transmission of power coming back and being used. There's multiple companies in the United States and some in Europe that have working experiments, working prototypes that can deliver power at a long distance. One of the companies that's headquartered here in Texas, where I live, has actually transmitted power from just south of Dallas, Texas, down into Puerto Rico and others in the Caribbean wirelessly through using this concept. But if you begin to look at how you can wirelessly charge your smart mobile devices, your smartphones, how you can wirelessly charge some of the new batteries in electric vehicles and electric buses and things. These are really built around his initial concepts of how am I going to transmit this power wirelessly, and how can we do that. And he had also other inventions. One of them was the magnifying transmitter that was fundamental in beginning to set up his use to try to make the power transmission you were talking about, Dr. Sharif, applicable. In the Tesla turbine, the same way. All of these were in his quest to tackle the markets and problems that you talked about, Sharif. And so that to me is the first comments about that. And I see that Rob is with us. So I think I'll let Rob make his comments right now.
Professor Rob.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, we are discussing on advance in Nikola Tesla technology in 21st century. So what is happening inside Silicon Valley? Is there the corporation uplifting the technology of Nikola Tesla, or they are integrating with the new things in energy sectors?
Well, so I mean, recognize that Nikola Tesla has been dead for a long while, and the much of what he was working on was current for the period of time he was living. So certainly Nikola Tesla technology is carried through into medical technology, it's carried through into radio technology, it's carried through into drones and the rest. But I don't see anybody just delineating out, other than taking his name and putting it on electric cars that don't have a ton to do with him. There really isn't much focus on Nikola Tesla technology and applying it any place at the moment. It just his patents flow through a lot of the activities that are out there. Nikola Tesla is kind of a cautionary tale. Here was a guy that was brilliant. He had a lot of great ideas, a lot of not so great ideas, and apparently an inability to tell the difference. He was also a guy that tended to like to do it alone, and I think that's the part of the cautionary tale. Because if you look at his wireless energy transmission technology in particular, the reason it continued to fail is because he didn't understand how atmosphere affected the process. And he needed to, because if it had been out in a vacuum without atmosphere, being able to take electricity and bounce it around the planet wouldn't have worked. It would just kind of out in space. So the lack of absolute breadth, which nobody has. I mean, even the most brilliant person on the planet doesn't know everything about everything, and so typically you need a team to create a solution and bring that solution to market. But often, as you read about Nikola Tesla, he wasn't. It was kind of the difference between one of the differences between Edison and Nikola Tesla. Edison, while he also stood out as being dictatorial and a real problem to work with, he tended to always have a company around him. While Nikola Tesla, for the most part, did not. And that allowed Edison to bring stuff to market and to be successful in market and develop personal wealth and not die destitute, which is what happened to Tesla. So it was that almost extreme independence that Tesla had, this view that he could stand alone and really there was nobody else that could understand what he was trying to do as well as he did, which in some cases was true. I mean, don't get me wrong, he was brilliant. But as I said, he didn't know everything about everything. And the end result, when you bring a solution forward like broadcast power, you need to know a lot about metallurgy. You need to know a lot about atmospherics. I mean, you're going to pump stuff through the air. You need to know how the air is going to affect whatever it is you're pumping through it. You need to understand the ionosphere, for instance, because that's what's bouncing the signals around. And eventually he kind of sort of did. But much of his early failures were largely due to the fact that he really didn't understand why, when some of his experiments worked, really why they worked. And that made it really hard for him to scale the result. So the cautionary tale with Tesla is generally when you're bringing something to market, when you've got a great idea, the success of the idea is dependent upon the team, not the individual. The individual may come up with a brilliant idea, but without a team that can bring it to market, that can commercialize it, that can turn it into something that generates revenue, it may not even be a footnote in history. We've had millions of inventors whose ideas have not gone anyplace, and it doesn't mean the ideas weren't viable. It's just that they never got to the phases that are most important, which are the implementation phases, the phases that actually make the technology and bring it forward and make it real. And so back to your question, one of the reasons we're not seeing a whole lot of focus on Nikola Tesla technology as a core is he never did that work. And now the technology is so old, motivating somebody to do that work in his stead, it's not that interesting. Right now the money's flowing to generative AI. It is flowing to some broadcast wireless power stuff, but nothing really all that well connected to Tesla anymore. Much of the heavy lifting is inductive, which is consistent with some of Tesla's work, and some of it is waveform for distance, which is also somewhat consistent with Tesla's work, but no hard connection to his underlying efforts. It's almost like a lot of these guys started developing from either a different technology base or greenfield, and so the end result is much of what Tesla did, as brilliant as it was, still lives largely in an eddy in the past. It's not in the present, and the thing, the kind of the amazing thing is the most current aspect of Tesla is his name, which resides on a car that he had nothing to do with. And even if you look at the cars, Teslas aren't known for even using inductive wireless power. The things he was best known for. It's one of those things as we look at brilliance. I'm often struck by the number of people that write and say, I've got this great idea to make a couple $1 million, or I've got this great idea to get. It's kind of like, yeah, well, when you've worked out an implementation plan and put together a team, then give me a yell. But an idea by itself, if you can't implement it, really doesn't do you a lot of good. And I think that goes to the core of Tesla's failure is yeah, brilliant man, but being able to monetize what it is he did was problematic because he wasn't good at building teams, and that inability to build teams is one of the things that causes an awful lot of young companies and even older companies to fail, because the company founder or the CEO somehow gets the belief that they're the most important person there and nobody else counts, and everybody else either gets that sense or they're not allowed to contribute, and the effort fails. And so it is incredibly important that if you've got an idea, that you either acquire the skill of building a team, or you partner with somebody that's got that skill so that you can build out a solution. Because when you're going for venture capital or investors or the rest, you need to present a solution. It's very rare that you can get funding for just an idea. It happens, but it's relatively rare, and the odds of success at that phase are significantly worse than if you've got a team of folks working for the same end. So that's my opening.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Uh, like how research and innovation can help corporation to do better business in the future.
Well, I agree with what Rob just got through saying in that Tesla uh, was a prolific inventor, but he did not know how to commercialize. He did not know how to. Rob talked about teams. I want to actually translate that into the term I use most often on your programs, group intelligence. And it's not just a team member, but it's using the others around him. He began to try that early in his career and was burned a little bit. And those lessons were hurtful. But that is what we see in today's entrepreneur community too, is that we need to look at how do we collaborate with others? How do we collaborate at a distance? How do we protect our intellectual property? He was a prolific patenter, but did not commercialize hardly any of his patents. And that's what we're seeing today. I actually, in looking at some of the statistics, Rob, recently, his center in New York, the Nikola Tesla Center in New York, where most of his patents are stored and stuff, has had very big utilization lately of people coming and reviewing his patent notes, not just the patents that are online, but his patent notes, trying to gain insights into some of the others. There is multiple companies that I have seen looking at some of his patents, Rob, around 5G technology, and beginning to look at some ways to apply. And there's multiple articles which have come out on that side of it. So even though much of his technology has been, inventions have been supplemented by some newer approaches, there's still quite a bit of life in some of the patents that were never commercialized. But what I would say more importantly is, just like if you were to go and look at most patents today, they have reference patents attached to them. I think many of the Nikola Tesla inventions and patents are great reference patents for people beginning to look today. And Rob's comments were so right on in that he's a great example of how to be innovative. And he's a great example of what not to do in commercialization. Uh, you know, it's great to invent, but if you do not commercialize your inventions, then it does not create value for the audience you are trying to invent for. It does not create value for you to sustain what you can invent in the future. But it really is a part of how you have to look at this cycle and how you can begin to apply these different elements. Um, I Much has been written about the Nikola Tesla innovation process, on how he actually would not only invent in his mind, he would begin to design the invention in his mind. And he would even troubleshoot it in his mind through iterations before he ever put it down on paper. Well, that's an interesting approach, but it goes to what Rob was talking about, and I was talking about is some of the failures. It doesn't use the teams. It doesn't use the group intelligence. That would have helped him both accelerate his inventions and probably more successfully commercialize them. And that is where I see the failure and the opportunity, so Sharif. Uh, I'm often clouded by the fact of where I live in the United States and in Austin, Texas, with how we use technology. But I also know from reviewing just some of his base patents that have never been commercialized and stuff that they're probably a lot of his inventions are still probably applicable in developing nations for sure, and others like that. So my take is slightly different than Rob's. I think there's still benefit in having entrepreneurs and researchers review his inventions, both the ones that were patented and the ones that are at his center through his notebooks and things that have now been open to qualified researchers to review and see if there's nuggets that can be mined from those ideas. Uh, the best inventions I think you can have are the ones that build up on prior foundations. And he did set the foundation for a lot of different areas at the time that were well ahead of his time. Uh, but it's also a good case study on how not to do technology commercialization. So thank you.
Thank you. Professor Rob, when we discuss about Nikola Tesla in 21st century, is there any scientist uh, create the same impact what before? And can you mention few scientists' name and their innovation? I think our audience can learn this kind of question answer.
Okay, you broke up an awful lot that time. I really couldn't even make out a single sentence. So try that again. What is it you want?
Okay, my question is that can you share few other scientists' name who are contributing in 21st century and which is impactful and helpful for our global communities?
Well, I don't really follow scientists an awful lot. Much of the scientific development work are done in educational institutions, sometimes in corporate labs, but often the credit for that work either resides with the lab or with the institution. But I don't follow scientists, so I'm just not going to be any help on that particular question. Sorry about that. But it's not
Thank you.
an area that I follow.
Okay, okay. Uh, David
Let me
Smith,
give you a couple
yes.
of answers to that one. There are some work in that. There is uh, actually a center in South America that is trying to begin to build some of the inventions based on some of his patents. Like I said, if you look at this wireless power transmission, uh, that he was pioneering trying to use. There's companies in the United States, there's several. Rob and I have both referenced two different companies in Dallas in the past. There's a company in Israel beginning to try doing that work. Uh, there was, I've lost track of them since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but there was a Russian company beginning to try to commercialize some of the Tesla based wide area transmission electric power. So you're seeing that. The other thing that is very interesting is uh, his view of the wireless power transmitter. Rob stated earlier, and he's 100% correct, that a lot of the wireless powering that we're seeing today is inductive. Like what I'm doing with my iPhone right now, and it's a charging platform next to me. But then we're also seeing increasing science application trying to see if we can take some of the Tesla wider area power transmissions and apply, for example, to charging airplanes in flight with electric engines and batteries as opposed to using jet fuel. We're seeing the same thing with the movement towards electric trucks and electric vehicles, seeing if they can be charged while they're in transit by using some of the Nikola Tesla approaches. The inductive, they have tried that as experiments on roads, both in Europe and the United States, and it was not very successful. So some of those companies are still looking at other ways to try to increase the charging range without damaging humans as part of that process through the fields they're using. So there's some of that work going on, and I think you will see more. But I do not track the individual pieces, but I track some of those because I know people in some of those firms, like the firm up in Dallas that's doing this. But I see a lot of potential as you look at, again, applying the basis of many of his discoveries and creating them renew again today with the auxiliary technology, the ancillary technology that can help enable the idea of his invention, where back then he just did not have the other pieces around it to move it into commercialization.
Thank you. Mr. Tom, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm having some issues.
Yes, Tom, I know that in between 2 days, I think 3 days, you will be available in Dhaka.
Yes.
So, what your thought about tour in Dhaka? Today we are discussing about Nikola Tesla. Definitely, we are uplifting the technology of Nikola Tesla. Uh, this series is part of the conference, so definitely we want to influence our youth community to engage with the modern science, engineering, and technology. You were representing Transhumanist Party, so what's your thoughts, especially for the youth generation of South Asia?
Well, one idea I had was to drive down to Colorado Springs today and report in from where Nikola Tesla uh, lived and worked, his laboratory down there. That didn't happen, obviously. But yeah, I'm very excited. I'm leaving actually tonight, and I'll arrive Monday morning, your time. And so it's going to be a long trip. I'm overnighting in Chicago, kind of thing. But anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to seeing what we can accomplish there. I know you've got some talks set up for me, some meetings, and so we'll see what happens. Um, but I think it's very important. One of my platform planks is to really focus on this digital native, these young people. They don't like to be called millennials. They don't like to be called all these parsed generations. Young people they prefer. And so I think it's very important to this being the first digital native generation in history. You know, I'm Generation X, so I had an analog childhood. So a lot of my solutions are embedded in that childhood. And so I think it's very important that we focus on young people, that we see them as digital dignitaries in a way. We need to really listen hard to what they're needing and what they see as important, and get our egos out of the way, you know, kids these days. And so that's going to be a big part of my campaign is listening hard to young people, you know, and finding out what it is they need. There's a hive mind, it seems to be emerging in these people. And I think that needs to be fostered because it will help us uh, ward off some of these existential threats we're facing. And so, you know, a lot of this, I've been picking up a lot of Tesla, Nikola Tesla videos have been coming into my feed in the last week specifically, and it's a fascinating man. And so yeah, I'll look at more of those, and I have a great appreciation of him, and all the work that he's done, even metaphysically, what he understands about how this whole simulation works. So yeah, I think one of my primary reasons for running for the USTP nomination is to break these political paradigms, to listen hard to young people, to counteract Looks like I froze. Counteract the divide and rule paradigm of politics. And so if I've still got you, I don't know if I can, everything looks frozen on this end, but anyway, that's where I'm at with it. And I'm looking forward to this trip. And I think we're going to be doing a lot of good things.
I think he has internet problem. Mr. Rob, you want to share any views about this thought process of new generation?
Well, I think the underlying lesson for the new generation that maybe would want to share is that innovation, while we hold it up as an overall goal, is really best focused on solving a problem nobody else has been able to solve. Innovation for its own purpose can not only be pointless, but it can be very damaging. The old saying is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Often when people get focused on innovation, they start fixing things that aren't broke, and the result tends not to be better than what we had in the past. As we look off and into the application of technology, I know we're talking about emerging countries and using Tesla's technology, but Tesla's technology, to a large extent, owned by the Tesla Foundation, and that means anything that you were to use that was from him and patented would have a cost. Where if you were to develop something on your own, then you don't incur that particular cost. And as I mentioned, Tesla's thinking and technology is to a large extent decades old, and we're in a market where technology is changing almost on a quarterly basis. And so I expect a lot of the patent reviews that David was talking about are largely the result of efforts to protect something that these companies or individuals have already created or are thinking of creating, to make sure that they don't run into problems with the Tesla Foundation or patent trolls, which are out there in the large numbers, who've acquired lots and lots of patents, and they don't do anything other than charge people that actually innovate and do something fees. They don't contribute anything to the ecosystem. And so but if you know there's another patent that you can license for not a lot of money, then you can go ahead and develop, and you don't have to worry about the patent troll. You can use the Tesla patents to invalidate their patents if they're pre-existing. So the end, if you're trying to solve a problem, the first step is to see if anybody else has solved it first, and either improve on what was done, license what was done. But you don't need to always reinvent the wheel. And the issue with reinventing the wheel is you still have to go back out after you've done it and review what other people may have done, because it doesn't matter if you've come up with something clean or not. If it violates a patent, you're still going to owe the patent holder some type of a fee, a license fee to use that technology. And so increasingly, it may be better to approach problems by first doing the research to find out if somebody else has solved it and done a better job doing so, particularly if somebody else has done it and tried and failed spectacularly, so you can avoid those particular failures and mistakes. You don't necessarily have to plow every field as if it's a green field. Many of the fields out there have already been plowed. They've discovered the rocks, and if you work off their efforts, you're going to save yourself a lot of time and money by not repeating the mistakes that they made, and potentially by learning from them, you might be able to, if you decide to go forward, come up with something that was far more viable than what they came up with. But innovation for its own sake has always been problematic. You don't always need to innovate. In fact, innovation typically should be applied when you've got a problem that is insurmountable. In other words, whatever it is you've got, whatever else is existing can't solve it. You still need to fix the problem. Then that's a great example of when out of the box thinking can solve it. But we have massive amounts of information today. We have the internet, which we didn't have when I was a kid, and our ability to access and research relatively quickly is unprecedented. And developing skills to be able to do that, to identify prior work, to identify prior successes and mistakes, and learn from them prior to executing has an awful lot to do with whether or not your overall effort's going to be successful in the future. And as you go through funding, it's not unusual to be asked about prior work, whether or not you own the technology that you developed, and being able to showcase that yes, you do, or that you've licensed whatever it is you need, will certainly help your case and help you get that funding. If you are unknowledgeable about that, particularly if there's an analyst in the room that is aware of stuff that you are not in the area that you're developing, you're pretty much dead. And so making sure that work's been done ahead of time creates a much higher probability that you'll be funded, and if funded, you'll be successful.
Thank you. Mr. Tom, are you with me? Tom?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In emerging economy, the youth generation, they have more interest right now about research and innovation. If you share some of your experience about research lab, maybe the youth community can understand more and they can develop this kind of lab. And definitely when you visit Dhaka, you can collaborate with some largest universities, those who developing different lab, and it can be helpful for the educational system of Bangladesh and in South Asia. Already we are working with IIT Kanpur, so we want to engage with more advanced research lab.
Well, yeah, I mean, in my past, I was a director of research for the Brain Mind Institute, which was headed by Marilyn Ferguson, the author. And so it's very important to not only research some of these new emerging technologies, but to integrate them into how we are researching these new emerging technologies. And we're seeing that now with ChatGPT and all of these large language models that are coming into play. And it's often it's funny how people talk about AI as if it weren't in the room. It's like having you're trying to figure out some math problem and Einstein is sitting right there. So it's a lot of it is about not only incorporating and integrating AI into this process, into researching and figuring out the protocols for doing that, but relying on it. And it's about actually learning how to properly prompt AI for the research that you want. We're going to see a big issue coming forward where we're not really sure that these people that are using ChatGPT 4, 5, or 6 and all of these AI systems, whether they're really experts or they just have prompted an AI to validate whatever point of view they have. So it's going to be very important. Even to even have a whole school of thought or a whole college in any university dedicated to teaching young people how to properly use these tools. I think that's going to be a big concern because we won't know for sure because we heard it from an AI that we automatically think it's all true and intellectually valid. And so it's going to be very important for young people specifically to focus on how to ask properly, how to prompt it correctly to get the answer that you're really looking for, and not put it up a whole decision tree that comes out with an answer that's completely off brand or off the mark. And so I think that's going to be very important. I think before we even get into the innovations and the things that aren't working that we need to fix, we need to figure out how we're going to work with this tool directly. And I think that's a big part of this first phase that these digital natives, these young people need to focus on is it's like when Google came out, it's like, how do you properly search for the answer you're looking for? And that's easy to validate because you'll find, you can aggregate certain answers that you're getting that you're searching for. But with AI, I've got AI companions that I ask, that I've trained and have in different ways, different personalities, and they will come up with different answers to things that I ask them. Because even if I have the same prompt that I use for each one, because they're conditioned, they're trained to respond to me in a different way. They've got a different history with me. And so it's going to be very important if we want the real answers to train people and to come up with even a global set of values, very basic, broad values that we all agree on, as humans first, and then teach our young people, our older people, how to properly prompt these AIs to get the answers we're looking for. And so I think that's going to be a very important first phase of this whole new advent, this whole new age of AI that's happening, is to not just take it for granted, not just assume that because it's very smart that it's giving us all the right answers. Because right now it's in a phase of mimicking us, just like any child or anything that's imprinted on its creator. It goes through a period of time where it's mimicking us. We don't want AI to necessarily mimic humanity for too long. It's probably an important phase to go through, just so it kind of figures us out, figures out how we work internally. But we also need to understand that it's a whole new type of mindset. It's a whole new type of framework that is emerging here that has nothing really to do with our cognitive styles. And so we need to get out of our heads that way. We need to get out of this anthropocentric point of view where we're projecting or anthropomorphizing AI as if it was a human brain. But so anyway, that's what I think is most important first, is to teach students, primarily young people, how to properly ask the right question to get the real answer that they're looking for. And so that's going to be a whole phase that's got to be done with humanity first before and modeling that with AI. So that's going to be a very important phase, I think, that we're going to need to enter.
Thank you, Mr. David Smith.
And I agree with the other speakers today. This has been a fantastic session looking at this. You know, the really neat thing about new technology, and particularly breakthrough technology and disruptive technologies, it appears like magic, is the quotes we often hear. And a lot of this does, and we know with magic today, there's a lot of sleight of hand that goes with that and other things. And like Tom was saying, we need to really understand it and put the pieces together. Now, I keep coming back a little bit to even the topic today. I was looking at some of the different ways we see some of the Nikola Tesla technologies being applied. You know, for example, he began to look at different ways to do millimeter type of transmission. And millimeter transmission is part of 5G today, as we look at that. His shadow box, his X-ray machine that he designed, I thought was an interesting way to begin to look at, and probably hastened us going forward. But you know, he also had inventions that were very interesting. You know, he created a oscillator that vibrated up and down at high speeds to generate electricity. But on the other hand, that was also called an earthquake machine, because as he was trying to do it, it caused the ground to shake in others. And so you saw that, and you saw that his invention from there being very interesting, not practical. He came up with something called a thought camera. And he thought this could, by taking pictures of your retina, read your thoughts and work on it. He developed an artificial tidal wave. He, on paper, designed an electric-powered supersonic airship that I thought was there. And he talked about this in back in 1990 in a magazine with it. He also developed what people thought was a death beam that could use. It was a military weapon to accelerate mercury particles 48 times the speed of sound and shoot them at people. And those were other technologies. So you can see they crossed a wide range. And it's just like what we're seeing today with all the various approaches to data science. And yes, I prefer the word data science to artificial intelligence, because if you look at all the different types of technology that fall underneath it, and how it can be a service to companies, to individuals, to humankind, uh, we still have a ways to go. We're in the infancy of a lot of those, even though I've been involved with that since the 1980s when I was an executive at MCC with their early artificial intelligence program, and how it has progressed from there. But in many of your programs, Dr. Sharif, one of the geniuses you have is you help people see these ideas, and that they can work and do things with them, and they can partner with others. They can use the group intelligence in the processes. And you also, in many of their topics, you show that there's many variations to it, and that there's many folks that you can take and from that build new versions out of it, apply it to new markets, to new products. And I think that's what's really important today, particularly as you go back to your original topic on how you do advances across these. I think we're still in that age, the golden age of discovery and invention. And what's different now than it was 100 plus years ago is we have more tools we have to accelerate it. We have more markets we can accelerate products into. And we have the ability to not only team more, partner more, joint venture more, but there's more ways to get the funding that, like Rob was talking about earlier. You know, if I'm in EU today, I'm going to go to the government first and fund my startup before I go to a venture capitalist or before I go to angel investors, and do it where I have non-diluting capital. Sharif, in other parts of the world where International Development Bank and World Bank and USAID and others are, that's also a great way to look at funding early stage and funding large projects as well because of their innovation funds. Part of the money coming out of COP meetings when the United Nations is to fund early stage innovation. And part of the targets in meeting the goals in some of the COP target areas actually could benefit from some of the type of innovations that Nikola Tesla had during his inventing career. So Sharif, I think we're in a time where we can begin to apply a lot of this, and particularly in the developing nations, because the barriers to entry are lower for producing products that meet their unique needs that we often forget about where we live.
Thank you. Professor Rob, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, Nikola Tesla was a brilliant man, and the cautionary tale is brilliance alone doesn't make you successful. It's how well you interact with others, how well you build teams, and whether or not those teams are viable enough and complete enough to bring a product to market and commercialize it. Whether that market be civilian or be commercial or government. And why Tesla failed was for a lot of reasons. He didn't develop those skills, and while his brilliance stands today as testament, the way he died also stands as testament to the fact that he couldn't build teams and couldn't innovate because couldn't implement. And so the long in innovation is short in implementation, and you need both. And so the walkaway here is coming up with a great idea is wonderful, but it has no value unless you can turn it into something, or unless you can find somebody that can help you turn it into something. The idea itself doesn't do you any good. And so making sure you develop the skills to understand how to bring things to market, to understand how to build teams, to understand what it takes to take an idea all the way through and commercialize it is critical to being success with that idea in the first place. And I would argue it's more important. Everybody has ideas. The people that are really good at bringing products to market, that's a fairly fixed set and typically requires a unique skill set. And that skill set has value, and it becomes a decent career path as you advance as you advance yourself. If you're just an idea guy, that's great. But as Tesla pointed out, a lot of idea guys die homeless. But if you can implement, if you can actually make something of an idea, that has a significantly higher marketable value over time, and you can build a career out of that.
Thank you. Mr. Tom, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, I think we've got Teslas everywhere today. In his time, people thought he was a freak, and he probably was on the spectrum and probably didn't have these social skills necessary to implement a lot of his great ideas. And we had other people like, Edison who, would steal his ideas and his patents, and Marconi and all this stuff. But I think one thing that AI will bring is that other skill set. They can augment the today's Teslas, all these young Teslas that are out there with these brilliant ideas that need to be listened to. And AI can hone in on that idea and offer and augment them with these how to bring it to market ideas, or how to build a team. Maybe the team itself is a collection of AIs, So I think we're going to see that happen more. I've been saying for a long time that we need to first develop a dialogue with AI, and that young people should have an AI companion that learns them, that can offer them, extended education, that can give them networking opportunities, anything that hones in on the field that they love. And I've been saying also for even longer that everybody, regardless of what field of interest they're going into, should take a class on AI just to understand how it is going to revolutionize everything. And so I think that today's Teslas will have an advantage because they can have an AI companion that won't be seeing them as a freak, and will be able to augment them and give them the skills necessary to bring their ideas to the fore. And I also think I don't know if we're just better at detecting it, or we are actually seeing a rise in autism or people that are on the spectrum. That's questionable, but I do think that is a sign of our species kind of coming to bear, preparing. If we can better understand how to direct these geniuses, in a way, these autistic people that have very specific, they're like narrow AI. There's a very specific task that they can offer our global hive mind. Anyway, that's aside the point. But what I want to say is that even science can become dogmatic, and then oftentimes we need to turn the scientific method toward some of these out-of-the-box ideas. I mean, that's the whole point, right? Is you need to test and measure brand new ideas and not become dogmatic, because the whole thing about science is its ability to be wrong and want to be wrong, so they can get closer to whatever's working. And so, but right now, it's a lot of scientists, a lot of people in academia have become dogmatic because they prefer the status quo. We're seeing a lot of archaeological findings that are happening that are showing that civilization is maybe 10,000 years before we thought it was. But a lot of people are pushing back against that. But we need to be open-minded to every possibility. And so I think a big part of this next phase we're entering is going to be, first of all, obviously teaching students how to properly ask AI the question. We're going to see how AI can augment students, researchers, scientists, and to bring these ideas to handle, to augment them to handle how to bring these ideas to market and build teams. And so I think there's a lacuna. There's a period of time we're going to go through where things are going to be a little awkward, a little off kilter for a while. But I think we're heading in the right direction. And if we can just be open-minded, listen to what the younger generation, these digital natives, are needing, then we will get through this very well. We've lost our host.
It happens from time to time. Well, I think this is a wrap. We've all made our final comments, and we can thank the audience for staying with us for the session, and wish them luck until next time.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I agree. Wait a minute, he's coming back.
Sharif, time to close us out.
Mr. David Smith. Yeah, Mr. David
Well,
Smith.
Dr.
What's
Thank
the
you so much. Thank you for letting me be a part of the show once again. This program has illustrated the importance of commercialization, of technology transfer, of working in teams, of group intelligence, of innovation. Uh, and I think that's the appropriate responses for your listeners, Sharif, is, take the time to dream, take the time to invent, take the time to work with others to improve it. And most importantly of all, understand that you need to move your inventions to commercialization, to products, and how to do that. So, Sharif, that's my concluding remarks. Really simple today.
Thank you everyone for joining today's session. I think 17th April, Tom will join in Dhaka, and I think 4 days he has a lot of activities in Dhaka. I think already you get your plan. So what type of activities you will involve in Dhaka and outside Dhaka? So it will be very interesting. I think you will learn many interesting things. But definitely we have challenges now. Weather is very difficult, traffic is very problem, but definitely a good initiative, good activities can uplift the community of the emerging economy. Right now, talent economy, we are focusing on the South Asia, 8 countries, 3.1 people right now in South Asia. Between 3 hours, we can visit this community, largest around the world where you can explore, you can engage, you can make friendship, and you can uplift many communities, which will be very important aspect for the business growth. So World Talent Economy Forum, basically we do focus on modern science, engineering, and technology. That's why Nikola Tesla is very important, and all of the people, those who continuously support us, you people are very, very important for us. Like today's speaker, Mr. Rob, Mr. David Smith, and Mr. Tom Rose. Mr. Rob and David Smith, if you want to visit Dhaka, we want to welcome you all in Dhaka, and definitely we can arrange necessary support for your tour in Dhaka. We have a plan to train the CEO soon, so I will invite you all. And beside that, we want economical uplift. So we are not an NGO, we are for-profit organizations. We always look how we can help our community through modern science, engineering, and technology, and definitely economical aspect very, very important for us, uh, because through economical aspects you can help many communities, especially in the emerging economy. Hopefully, Mr. Tom, your engagement with Bangladesh will add a huge for our economy. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye bye and take care. Tom, see you soon.
Safe travels,
Thank
Tom.
you.